This is Young-Gongora. I'm here with Micah Young. I'm Jake Gongora. And in the back, we got Kevin Guyton producing the show today. Well, yeah, when you first saw the track lists, the album cover, what was your first thought?
Well, immediately when I saw
Before even diving in.
Okay, yeah, when I saw my first glance at the album cover, I immediately thought of like certain artists because how the album cover looks, like the illustration of it, the artwork. It reminded me of like a particular aesthetic, usually found within like a lot of electronic music, like even certain pop artists. Like I thought of like Frank Ocean, his Blonde album. And I know that's like a strange connection because they're totally different artists.
Absolutely.
Right? But, you know, you have an R&B artist and she's really left field and such. But just the album covers themselves, the Dust album cover and Blonde, and look at the titles. They're very one singular word. So I just thought, you know, this is probably going to be some weird, like maybe just kind of like, you know, it just falls into that realm of somewhere between those, that kind of music, this kind of dreamy kind of music or ambient kind of music. So
absolutely.
That's the first impression I got from the album cover, you know. And I've already listened to her before, her previous albums. So. And
well, that was Quarantine and
Chance of Rain, and her EPs she released. She has a number of EPs and albums she released on Hyperdub Records, famous record label known for releasing a lot of dub music and electronic music of today. Sometimes it's kind of experimental, it's techno music too. But she's definitely one of the more, you know, renowned artists on that label. So, yeah.
If you had to describe her genre, what would you say it is? Experimental, avant pop?
No, I wouldn't go that route because that was Wikipedia, and we were going to scratch that out when I told you in the beginning. So, no, I would say it has experimental kind of leanings, maybe. You know, if you want to go so far and call it avant-garde, be my guest, but I would never personally call that.
I don't want to disrespect you.
No, it doesn't matter. I'm not.
Once you had a chance to dive into it, like what were some things that you felt when you're listening to the album?
Some of the feelings I kind of experienced were, you know, the sense of loss, like kind of lost in space, kind of.
Right.
Like the album is kind of very interstellar. Like it sounds very like it could be played in like, I don't know, in Mars or something. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but it has a lot of like, you know, kind of like weird, jittery electronics and a lot of long areas of space. Like there are moments of the album where she has like kind of a song, a straightforward song, like the second track, Jelly, the single on this album, and it follows up with kind of more of an ambient song, and then she kind of repeats that pattern throughout the album. Of course, she deviates from it sometimes, but mainly there's kind of a structure in the album where she has these kind of short ambient interlude tracks, like "Who Won" or your famous track, the one that you like.
The one of the letters.
Yeah, I don't really know how to say it, and the track that follows, "Jillian."
Of course.
Like these tracks, especially, kind of evoke this kind of like feeling of.
Yeah, especially with the track that you're mentioning, is with the jazz influence.
Yeah, there's a lot of jazz inspired.
And I'm really a big proponent of jazz music and like diving back into classic and traditional jazz, and I felt really gratified that she depended so heavily on jazz as an influence on this album. A
lot of jazz inspired chords within her piano. She's actually a pianist herself. She's a classically trained piano. But she's also delved into jazz. You can hear it in the elements of the piano playing and how the beats are played, especially on Jelly. Like, even though it's not really jazz, sometimes that song kind of reminds me of R&B. So there's kind of these R&B elements in the album. So I kind of made that connection.
And are there any songs in particular that you think have an R&B
style? The second track. The second to last track, Do You Ever Happen or whatever. What is it, the name? Do You Ever Happen? Whatever. It's like the track right before the 11th track, and that track reminds me of just reminds me of contemporary R&B music of today. You know, a lot of the new quote unquote neo R&B of whatever. Like it has those elements within not how she sings maybe sometimes, but just how it's played, like the musical style and how she's singing over her music. I just get that kind of vibe from that. So.
What do you think is the strongest song on the album?
Probably the 5th track, and I think that's Moon Talk. That's my favorite. I think it's my favorite, but also I think it's the strongest part of the album. One, because it just hits you right off the bat. Like, it's not like the other tracks where it takes some time to gradually progress somewhere and just these soundscapes, evolving and stuff. But this track just immediately hits you. There's just a great feeling it evokes. I can't really explain it. I heard the track and I like the samples she uses because she samples like a lot of weird Japanese vocal samples, and then she has like this hard-hitting like kind of like pattern of like, it sounds like timbales or like bongos, or kind of, so it has a very percussive kind of element. At other times it kind of reminds me of music from Brazil. So her music is very worldly, and I think that song particularly captures all those elements in a very small length of time.
Speaking of influence, were there any albums that were influenced her? This album does.
Yeah, I actually have one album right now. It's this guy. I don't know how to say his name.
Yusuf Lateef.
Lateef, yeah.
Yusuf Lateef.
Yeah, she had it on a Amoeba video I saw recently, and this is not the album that she referenced,
right,
but she talked about this artist. The album she referenced was Gentle Giant, I think, by him, and just like he's pretty like experimental, kind of like jazz kind of music. Don't really have a lot to say. If you're into this kind of stuff, you probably heard of like Art Ensemble Chicago, or if you're into like Miles Davis Electric Jazz era or some other stuff.
It's a good listen.
You could listen to him. He has a lot of oriental kind of elements. It's not just strictly jazz music, like traditional jazz music. It kind of delves into more ambient kind of music, or Indian kind of music as well. So there's a lot of worldly elements within it. So I can see why her album and herself, she would be influenced by this person particularly. And amongst many others, she's influenced by dub music and Japanese music and just pop music in general. But she does it very neatly. She just is able to make it, boil it all down in a melting pot and just kind of like make it a very cohesive, framework. And it's great music. I mean, that's really all I can say about it. So, what are your final thoughts? Do you have a rating for this album?
A rating for this album? I felt this is probably, if we're gonna go like on a scale of 1 to 10, I felt that this was a solid like 8.
Okay.
I felt it had some really like high potential songs, really, a good sound to it overall. It's a very consistent amount of like good tracks.
Yeah.
And it's something that you typically don't see with lower scale underground type artists. And it was just a really high consistency of good music on the album. How about you?
Yeah. So, give it a listen. Listen to Dust by Laurel Halo.
I can do this. I can do it. You don't deserve it. You can't do this. You can't do this. I can do this.